Inequalities and their graphs. Alright, in the word inequality, the prefix "n" means not, and the root word is equal, so it means not equal to. And some examples for not equal to are greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and not equal. Alright, one important thing about inequalities is they can have infinite solutions. So for example, x is less than -2 has solutions of -2.1, -3, -4 is a solution, -100, -10,000, and as big of a negative number as you can think on. So you can think of inequalities more like a range of numbers. Now to graph inequalities, we're going to have 3 steps that we need to remember. And this way we're always going to do it right. And the first step is make sure the variable is on the left side. So for example, if you had -3 is less than x, that would become x is greater than -3. And always go back to the teeth marks. That inequality sign was eating up the x. It eats up the bigger number. So if we put it on the right side, or the variable on the left side, it still needs to be eating up the number on the left. So that alligator is going after the x either way. Alright, second thing to remember, we want to graph open dots for greater than or less than signs, and we want to fill in those dots or close them in for greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. Think this is the other part of the equal sign, so that means it is a solution. And these are not solutions. Alright, the third step might be a little dangerous. Just kidding. We're going to draw a ray from the dot you made, and the inequality sign points for you. So just like this arrow is pointing in the direction it's going, so is the inequality sign going to point. And remember, greater numbers are more positive, that means they're on the right side of a number line, and lesser numbers are more negative, they're on the left side of a number line. So for this step, if this was a, let's say x is greater than 4, notice that arrow is telling us it's pointing which way? It's going to the right. But if we had x is less than 4, then look, this arrow is pointing to the left, so we're going to graph it to the left. So that part, that inequality sign, tells you which direction it's going. Alright, go ahead and pause the video if you need more time. We're going to do an inequality keywords chart and then do a couple examples. Alright, so make a chart with 4 columns, and we're titling it Inequality Keywords, and we're going to have a greater than symbol, a less than symbol, greater than or equal to symbol, or less than or equal to symbol. Alright, the first one is just a greater than symbol. The next one's a less than symbol, and what helps me remember this looks like a slanted L, doesn't it? So that's an L for less than. That's a way to not get these mixed up when you try to say them. And one of the ways we can say the third one is greater than or equal to. Now there are a few other ways to say that. So another way is no less than. And think if something is no less than something, then it can be that number or more than that number, or greater than that number. Next, think of the word minimum. You need a minimum of a 93% to get an A. That means you need a 93 or greater to get an A. You need to get at least 8 hours of sleep to be well rested. There, the word at least means you need to get 8 hours or more. So that means greater than or equal to. Alright, now the good thing is, if you remember those four for greater than or equal to, it makes less than or equal to that much easier because it's just the opposite of these words. So the opposite of greater than or equal to, of course, would be less than or equal to. And the opposite of no less than would be no more than. The opposite of minimum would be maximum. Think of maximum like a speed limit. The maximum speed you can go is 55 miles per hour. That means you can go 55 or below and still not be in danger of getting a ticket. I'm sure if you talk to different people, they might have differing views than what I just said about a speed limit, but that's the actual definition. Okay, at least. The opposite of that would be at most. Whoops, this guy didn't look at the speed limit. Alright, now that we got the lingo down, we're going to do a couple examples. Alright, example 1. Whoops, there we go. -1 is greater than a number. Now we don't know that number, so we're going to call that number as x. And I'm just going to write it the way I just learned. So -1, greater than symbol goes like this. I don't know the number, so I call that x. And now remember our steps. Our first step was to make sure that the letter is written on the left. So x needs to be on the left. And remember, this has some fangs busting out. And it's eating up the bigger number. So if it's eating the -1 right now, whenever I put the -1 here, it still needs to be eating up the -1. There we go. So x is actually less than -1 is how we would read this. Now the second step is we want to make sure that we get the open dot or closed dot correctly. So I'm going to draw a number line. When I draw that number line, I always put the solution in the middle. So -1 goes in the middle. And then I'm going to put the number to the right of that, which would be 0, and then 1. I just do a couple numbers to the left and right. And then to the left of that would be -2 and -3. Now, this is an open dot because it doesn't have this line. So it's an open dot on -1. That means it's less than -1. It can't be -1, but it can be any number less than that. Then my third step is think of the arrow. And this is like an arrow right here. It's pointing to the left. And you can also think of it, all the lesser numbers are to the left. They get more negative. So we draw our graph going to the left. So any of the numbers over here are solutions. For instance, -2 is a solution, -3, -10. And -1 is not a solution, neither is 0 or 1 or 2 or 100. Alright, let's try one more of those. Alright, example 2. -8 is no more than a number. Alright, let's first off write it the correct way. So -8 is no more than a number. Well, the number, we don't know it, so we call it x. And no more than, remember your chart? No more than means, it's right here, means less than or equal to. That means -8 is, it can't be any greater than a number. So it can be less than the number, but it can't be greater than the number. It can also be equal to the number. All right, well now let's rearrange that a little bit. So our first step again is to make sure that x is written on the left-hand side. So I'm going to write x here and -8 over here. And this alligator was eating up the x, so when we rewrite it, we need to make sure it's eating up the x. So it's x is greater than or equal to -8. And now our second step is open dot or close dot. Well, it has this line here, so that means it's also equal to. It can be equal to. So we're going to draw our number line, put your solution in the middle, and then put a couple numbers to the right. Notice that these are getting less negative if I go to the right. -7, -6, and then more negative numbers would be -9, -10. And I'm going to put a closed dot at -8. And now my third step is I want to use my arrow. And think about your arrow. This is pointing the direction it wants to go. So that arrow is pointing to the right. Again, another way to think of it, if this is greater than, that means all the greater than numbers are more positive, which is to the right-hand side.